welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I feel so fortunate to have this like spotlight. I'm literally in the.
You're glowing. I said daylight. It when you came on. It's just, it's something I kind of take for granted because in the closet, there's a window right here. But I'm like, I actually have to remind people like that is just a built-in gorgeous light when you face a window. You're glowing. So that's lovely. Lovely. It's a benefit of the snow. It also reflects even more natural light. One of the bonuses. But I'm going to jump right in because I do feel like we have a bunch to talk about. We're going to be highlighting some events coming up as well. But we're really debunking nonprofit stereotypes, misconceptions. We're going to dive in. I'd be remiss not to focus on your 4-year anniversary coming up in March. So I want to congratulate you on that. Is that right? In March?
What an astute observation. Yeah, March 21st, actually, I think. March 21st will mark 4 years of coming to United Way. And it's really interesting because 2 of those have been spent in this new normal kind of like pandemic landscape of sort of redefining everything. I don't know. So it's been a wild ride. Sometimes it feels a lot longer than that because there is so much knowledge and talent within my team. I mean, I really do feel that I have amazing people around me. And then sometimes I'm like, wow, that flew by. I don't know. Yeah, it's wild. 4 years.
I feel like you're right on with where many people are in the time frame. It's just this wonky, warped twilight zone of time. It's almost like being a parent. Like it seems to sludge through and then years go by and then you sludge through and then years go by.
Totally. It's really interesting though, because I feel like, at first we were in this like crazy, like react, how do we do things differently? And, and we've made it this far, but like, when I really think about it, it's like, you're just doing the same thing, right? It's just like a different set of problems or a different set of challenges, but like, that's what you do every day, right? Like as a parent going to work, like you just make it work, right? Like you have no other choice but to get through it one way or another. And it really is. It's only when you like pause and you're like, whew, that was 2 years, but we're still going, you just keep rolling. I don't know.
Well, I don't know if that's everybody. I think that's you, which is such a wonderful aspect of your personality. And it was just why you're heading this incredible organization, United Way, is you're very pragmatic and you're very, this is happening and we're going to get through it and we're going to keep moving forward. So I do feel like you take it for granted. Maybe. That's a beautiful aspect of your personality that I was definitely a deer in headlights. I think a few people were, and some people maybe went backwards and forwards. You have this gracious, genuine, grounded drive. It's not a bulldoze. It's not a snowplow. What would be your drive? What would be your automobile? I don't know. A train
I feel
almost.
Like I've got snow tires on those, so I've got good traction. I don't know. That's me. Just trying not to slip.
We'll figure it out. It's like
right in the middle.
It's like Seinfeld's comedians in cars with coffee always equates a car to a person. I'm gonna come up with it. If anybody has any insight, we'll figure that out. But still, and I do wonder. This goes right into one of my first questions: is so you started your career in 2 of the most male-dominated fields, industries, finance and tech, and I'm wondering I'm assuming, but they had to. I'm wondering what you learned that helps where you're at now in the career that you're in now.
It's interesting. So we have a group called Emerging Leaders United, and it's mainly under 40 business leaders in the community that want to be part of something bigger, right? So they joined this group, and we spent a lot of time developing this like coffee chat series. And I got this question actually from a young woman in the area who is in a fairly male-dominated field and was just asking me, and didn't necessarily know my background, but was saying, like, how does it feel to be in a position of leadership, wherever your experience is from, kind of at this point? And the one thing that I went back to is when I think about, like, I mean, first of all, another lifetime, right? Like right out of college, fresh into, I was supposed to be going to Teach for America. I had signed up for it, realized I had way too much student debt to even think about doing that, and just kind of ended up in finance. It was really just I don't know, roll of the dice. But so thinking about banking in that time of being such a young, vulnerable female with no experience in any industry, period, but in particular with, I mean, really, I was working with people who were 20 years my senior, male, and super just old school, right? So between that and then, like you said, the tech industry, I mean, I think when I was in the tech industry starting in 2012, it was still really, it was a hustle, right? It was cutthroat. It was a hustle, definitely male dominated. And I think what I've learned coming out of both of those things, and now, ironically, leading a team for the most part of women, which I think is not uncommon in the nonprofit industry. I think that the one thing that I still take with me is like, I have to commit. Like, I have to have an opinion and commit and be confident that I'm not always going to get it right. But if I surround myself with good people and we're committed to the right mission, it's going to be okay, right? And I think you have to have a certain level of confidence to do that. And I feel like in the past couple of years, I've read about, or I've heard a lot of people talking about imposter syndrome, right? And like, where like you just feel like maybe you're not in the right place, or maybe you're not doing what you should be doing, or you don't have the right pedigree, or whatever it is. But it's like, if you just have like an ounce of confidence and you commit to something, knowing that you might have to be humble along the way when you make a mistake or you stumble, like, it's going to be okay. And if I could tell my 20-something-year-old self that, it would be just that. It would be just commit to something, like commit to a perspective, commit to an opinion. I feel like I'm by nature a little bit indecisive. And I think part of it's because I'm easygoing. I can kind of go either way, right? So it's been a hard skill for me to learn to just commit to something and say, okay, this is the direction we're going. This is my perspective. There's meaning in it.
So I would love to know, to follow that up, is being a self-proclaimed someone who can sometimes be indecisive. What helped you? What was it a person, or what was it that helped you become leaning more towards committing and being decisive?
Well, it's interesting. I think this is, I don't like to feel like I don't want to promote gender stereotypes or gender norms, but I feel like in, having spent all of those years in such a male dominated workplace, I feel like I encountered few in the beginning, I guess more and more as I go along, but few women who had that same, just like, not so much confidence, but just disregard that I need to choose a path. I need to choose it now. And that's my priority. And I think that, at least for me, I have a hard time like prioritizing just my own opinions sometimes, right? Because I like to deflect, I like to listen, I like to absorb. And so I feel like, though, I've been around so many people who have a quicker ability to put that aside for a second and say, no, I need to, I really need to prioritize like choosing a path. And so I feel like because I was surrounded by so much of that, it did make me force myself to say, okay, if I'm going to get anywhere, like, there is value in my opinion and my thought process. So I just need to plow ahead a little bit. So I think it's probably just being surrounded maybe by people who are more willing to do that. I don't know. I guess that goes to show, though, that you need all sorts of people to make it work, right? You can't have just people who deflect and are maybe naturally more of a wallflower. You have to have people who are always willing to plow ahead.
Well, and you're nailing so many things. And if we can keep using the analogy of plowing, let's do it. Why not? Let's see how many times we can say something referring to snow and blowing. I dare you. That's your challenge. But I love you saying that, because I feel like so often, I just had a conversation with a client about that today, how we're so divisive right now across the board, that being able to look at our differences, you just spoke to it beautifully, about our differences are what create this whole. And if we can look at them as being a strength and advantageous, you're also a very self-aware and inclusive leader to be able to be, okay, I can be indecisive. I want to pull someone in who is going to be more decisive, because I know that might not be my strength. I could do it. However, when we're going to make this decision, I know this team member
Absolutely.
could do it. And it's a game changer to be able to, it's often, not all the time, but it's often like, oh, if I'm a leader and I call myself out, I may not look, you might lead back into imposter syndrome, or I shouldn't be here. Instead, it's like, yeah, you know, sure, I'm human. And fortunately, I have this person on my team. So I think that's so huge. So it is leading me to the question about power. And it's such a loaded word. And I just want your perspective on being in a leadership position, how that offers the opportunity to look at power from a vantage point of creating impact and influence instead of looking at power as this loaded.
You know, I think so much of like power, and when I think about power, I think of like from a leadership perspective of decision making, right? Of like having the ultimate, like I need to call the shots here, right? But when I think about it, it's just that, right? It's like after having all of these different areas of inputs, whether it's from my leadership team, my directors who lead our kind of functional business areas, or it's from community-based organizations that we're working with, like wherever those inputs are coming from, to me, power and ultimate decision-making is really an exercise in like culling down information, right? And so there's not necessarily ego that goes along with it. It's just like the ability to sift, to say, okay, I've got all of these inputs. How do I weight them? How do I make sure that I respect the inputs? And it's really just like sifting through and getting to a place where, and I've certainly learned, and I know you have too, it's like, the goal is never to try to make everyone happy or to try to necessarily arrive at a decision that is like perfect. There is no perfect, right? There is no scenario where maybe everyone gets exactly what they want. But what you're trying to do is end up in a place where everyone can be amenable to moving forward, right? Like everyone has the ability to work with it and to move forward, and they just have a common kind of direction or a common thing that is steering them. So for me, power is knowing that you are ultimately the one that is responsible for sifting through all the noise and saying, okay, we got this, like this is our direction.
And adding on to that, so we sift through, this is our direction, and realize, and I mean, and again, I feel just knowing you that you take for granted that your direction underlying it is, how can we be of the most positive influence in the community? How can we have the most positive impact? And it goes without saying, but for a lot of leaders, it doesn't. There isn't that. I know that's one of the values is integrity within, because I checked out the page and you guys have for anybody who's interested, just to look through, and you guys clearly live those values. So that's what I was saying about the impact and influence. You personally don't have to think about that in a way because it's already ingrained. And I would think for your team too, which is just amazing. I mean, that's something I think you take for granted. I don't think every leader has that so within them that they know they can just make these decisions that are from that value. So bravo to you on that one.
Well, you're kind to say that. It makes me think though, the other thing that like I had mentioned to you, and I think that we were going to talk about, and this does just like parlay right into it, is that I think the thing that we talk a lot about, and that I know that my team feels strongly about, is that sometimes the adage, like, if it's not broken, you don't need to try to fix it, right? That is true. But at the same time, if you're not constantly trying to innovate, you never go anywhere necessarily, right? So the other thing I said before too that I really meant is that I know I'm not going to get everything exactly right. And I know that we're going to make mistakes, but the whole point is that you're doing it in a way where you're always building allies, right? You care about integrity, you're true to your mission, you build relationships along the way, but you fail forward. So you might not get it exactly right, but you tried and you inched a little bit closer to whatever the goal is. because I do think that in the nonprofit industry in particular, so many nonprofits don't necessarily have all the resources they need to run an effective business. And at the end of the day, we might be a nonprofit because of our balance sheet. It's still a business, right? We just happen to be in the business of trying to make a positive impact in the community, which is a pretty great business to be in if you have to, right? But I mean, so I think if you don't have all the resources, there is this tendency to always choose safe and to always choose like, well, maybe we shouldn't reinvent the wheel. Whereas in any other business sector, you know, that's not how they approach innovation. And I think that that's the one thing that we try to do freely. And I think more nonprofits, you know, we try to do things that encourage or support other nonprofits, other startups that are just getting going. Like we try to support making that happen and giving them honestly, the privilege to try to fail forward.
Yeah, I love that, the privilege to fail forward. And it's making me think of two things. So one thing, when you said, you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It makes me think of, well, we're doing it that way because that's the way we've always done it. And that's where the trap comes in. I'm hearing like, okay, if it's a well-oiled machine, it still needs to be reassessed. So it's the same thing. Like, okay, your car's running really well. You're still going to get an oil change, like because you're keeping up on it. So it's the same type of thing of, or if your snowplow needs an oil change.
That's right. You're still going to put your chains on your tires.
So, my point is that like, if it's not broken because you're still paying attention to it. You're not just letting it fall to the wayside and you're checking in. Does this still align with our core values? Is there a better way to do this while still just keeping it fresh or whatever it is? So that totally makes sense. One thing, and I might get major pushback on this, I think it's worth saying though, like there is a sense of coming from a private profit space and bringing that knowledge into the nonprofit sector that is highly beneficial. I feel like I'm hearing that from what you're saying, from personal experience, but also professional experience.
Absolutely. And it's, you know, it's interesting because as you alluded to, my background is not in nonprofit health and human services. Surely an interest area, but that's not what my professional experience has been that brought me to United Way. And I remember initial conversations that I was having 4 years ago before I stepped into this role of, you know, why should we choose you? What do you bring to the table that's different? Because you certainly don't bring, you know, an intimate knowledge of how this nonprofit functions or, you know, what the specific landscape of health and human service nonprofits looks like in our area. Why should we choose you? Why would you commit to this? And what I said was, you know, again, like at the end of the day, the best thing that United Way can do is steward the investments of its donors. So whether those are individual donors, whether those are corporate donors, whether those are grants that we're securing for our area and managing, like all of that revenue is an investment. And to be a good steward of that investment, certainly you have to have a really strong business acumen, because how else can you approach running a business and knowing that is your number one charge, is to make sure that you manage an investment well, and you still get people coming back to say, hey, I really believe in what you're doing. And I believe in the way that you're running this. So again, at the end of the day, whether you pay out a dividend to shareholders or not, to me, doesn't determine whether at the end of the day, you're running a solid business. And I think, you know, we try to think about that a lot in our day-to-day. We might be talking about health and human services and the impact that we're making in the community, but the only reason we're still talking about that is because we are responsibly running our business. So.
Yeah, exactly. And you're leading right to the questions I want you to debunk. So I have a list of questions and you pretty much you answered some of them. Let me just look here. I have them right here. And so they're from resource-wise, Forbes and Firespring. Everybody knows Forbes, Firespring. It was just I want to say it's a marketing company, but they focus on for-profit and nonprofit marketing. And you already spoke to some of it. One of them that I want to stay on, I'll get to in a minute. The first one you already did is that nonprofits can't make a profit. Clearly, that's not true. You spoke to that, and that I think that's almost worth jumping over because it's just so untrue. That nonprofits are only run by volunteers. So I want to give you time to give a shout out to all the people on your team, because I do feel like that's often, you picture people on like the 15th floor of an old building, with cobwebs and maybe 2 people that are working busily and all the rest are volunteers. And that's not the case. So can you just speak to that misconception that they're only run by volunteers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have an incredible team of people who are doing everything from marketing to finance to fundraising. We have people who have been with us anywhere from 6 to 30 years. I have someone who has been at United Way for 30 years and has evolved along with United Way. And the reason is because of that commitment to the mission and the work. And I think a lot of positive energy that we try to keep going, right? Like that's really important. But the people, it's funny too, back to like leadership. The other, in my mind, the most important thing that is like under my job responsibilities is managing talent. Because in my mind, we are nothing without our people, right? We're a bunch of marketing assets, digital assets. We've got some systems that we use, some cloud-based platforms, but we are nothing without the people that are the subject matter experts behind those, right? And if you can't identify, cultivate, keep talent, I think you're really at a disadvantage. So let me get back to the original point of nonprofits are all staffed or run by volunteers. We have a huge network of volunteers. Volunteers are really important to what United Way does, but our core business is built on some really, really strong skill sets and roles and individuals. And I think that is a myth that in some way, like a nonprofit has to operate on a shoestring budget, right? Like I remember, people still say that now. But I remember even like 10 years ago, like that was really a thing where like the lower your operating overhead is, right? Or the cost of your fundraising, the better off you were. But then fundraising and nonprofits have changed so much, particularly because I guess in the past, probably 10 years at this point, but like realistically, think about like when you and I were in like high school and college, right? I don't want to totally date us, but you couldn't just like take out your phone and make a donation real time to any moment in crisis, right? That wasn't a thing. And so there's technology that has enabled us to cut down on some of that overhead, right? And to be really efficient. But in my mind, back to like the whole point of this, we're still running a business. And to run a business, you need talent, you need people in an organization that make it run and that have creative minds and a vision. So volunteers are really important, but honestly, the people and the talent behind United Way are what make it, I think, successful.
Yeah, and are what make volunteers want to be a part of it.
Well, sure.
Right?
And donors.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I was going to ask you too. I'm looking at my blinders in front of me, but total like light in front of my face. I'm trying to get out of that light, but I can't. So I'm just going to hang with it.
Embrace it.
I'm going to embrace it. So the volunteering, getting people. So the point is this: if you didn't have the staff to back up to go, wow, I really believe in United Way. It's a well-oiled machine. I love the leadership. They're doing really savvy things. Like I'm just into it. I want to volunteer there. Sorry to say, that does make a big impression, and it does allow people who are strapped for time to not just, yes, it's great to be able to jump on PayPal or whatever the platform uses and send something in as payment. You need that too. For people to actually give their time, there has to be that connection, right? So I'm so with you on that. And I am wondering, for people who are feeling like, yeah, I love being able to give money United Way and to be able to share in what they're doing for our community, I want to be involved, I just am super strapped for time. What would you say to people to start out? Where would they start?
In terms of how to volunteer?
Yeah. How to physically volunteer if they're strapped for time?
So I think, okay, this brings up a really good point, and I didn't even mention this to you separately, but so a couple years ago at this point, someone on our team, Betty Joan Beaudry, who is a star and is super tech savvy, was thinking about this whole just idea of like coordinating volunteers and kind of back to that like stereotypical like how nonprofits run, right? Like you think of a food pantry or really any other health or human service nonprofit as having like a clipboard, right? And they're like checking in their volunteers. They're like writing down names, checking, okay, you're here for the shift from 11 to 1. Like that's like what in your mind you might think of because it's happened for a long time. And there are a lot of nonprofits who are still operating that way. And we were like, there has to be a better way, right? Like, how do we give value back to our system of nonprofits by building something or by finding something that is a cloud-based platform that allows you to manage your volunteers, right? And to also connect volunteers with opportunities, because that's the other piece of it. And that's what, honestly, I think like, when I think about, okay, what is United Way good at? It's connecting. It's connecting resources. It's connecting people and volunteer opportunities. It's connecting nonprofit agencies with those resources. Like it's being the center of that nexus. And so we launched this platform called Volunteers United. And it is, at the time, there have been other groups who have launched their own regionalized version of that. When we launched this, it was the first in New York State to actually bring those things together. So nonprofit agencies, their opportunities, companies that, of course, want their employees to give back. So they give them a couple days a year to volunteer, but they had no way of finding those opportunities or signing up for them. High school, like National Honor Society students, right? They have a volunteer requirement. So how do they find volunteer opportunities? And so we launched this platform. And it's a great way to sift through like, okay, in our area, there are lots of opportunities that are even remote, like thinking about pairing students with tutoring opportunities or, for example, an organization who might need folks who are good at making fundraising calls, right? Like they can post that opportunity and volunteers can match with it and find it. So launching that platform was a really great way to put something in front of people to say, here, let us help you. Like whatever time you have, whether it's maybe once a month, you can give an hour, or maybe you don't have time to give, but there's an organization that is listed, you know, a top 10 needs list. Hey, we need winter jackets. We need this particular item for our food pantry. And that's your volunteer effort, is saying, I can check that box. I can certainly commit to giving that in a way that's still, you know, that's still part of like the whole volunteer ecosystem. So that platform, Volunteers United MV, is really a great place for people to go to say like, all right, what's the first step? What can I do? And the cool thing about it too is that you can actually generate a volunteer resume through the site once you've signed up and actually volunteered for a number of different opportunities. So we've had high school students who have used that site after they've volunteered a number of times to kind of create their resume of like what they've done for volunteer work, which is cool.
That is, that's a huge, I mean, there's so many advantages from what you just said. I wouldn't be able to list them all. The sense of community, the sense of specific passion to what you're drawn to within the huge umbrella of initiatives that you guys cover. That's something that's really important that will create that dedication to, is finding something that you really have either a personal connection to from a loved one, or just you're advocating for, being able to find that. Building your resume, especially for the age group that you mentioned, that part's huge. I'm also hearing that, and for those who are interested, in the notes we're going to have, in addition to what we're going to talk about the upcoming event in March, we'll have the Volunteers United link there for people. Awesome. But for high school students and college students to it's almost like a preview before they even, if they choose to move on and go on to college, they get a clear sense of what they care about, what they want to be involved in. So that may inform what they study. It could inform if they're moving away from home, maybe they have some connection with another organization. So there's all of these beautiful links and connectors. I mean, it's just what you said is what you guys focus on, which is incredible.
Yeah, honestly, we've had people who, we have someone who's pursuing a master's degree in social work, who has used the platform to connect with opportunities in very specific kind of focus areas, to determine if that's what sort of concentration she wants to pursue.
Yeah.
I think there are just a lot of really great use cases for it. And I think in general, and we have some great, honestly, we're able to make this platform free to our community because we have some great sponsorships behind it. And so ConMed and the Fountainhead Group, they sponsor this platform so that our community can have access to it without any sort of burden of cost. And the cool thing about that is that, it's not just high school students, but everyone should have an easy way to feel like they can be part of something bigger or part of something that drives positive impact. That's, that is a low barrier to entry. And so I think if you have a centralized way of connecting people around volunteer opportunities, I think it's a win-win, right? Like rising tides lift all boats. And that's how I think about volunteering.
Yeah, I absolutely. And I agree in regards to the idea that, having this, it's a great reminder on the whole continuum of our ego. It's a great reminder that we're a tiny little speck in this huge cosmos. And at the same time, what we do matters and we can contribute because it can. And I love that you broke down the options of volunteering because it can be very overwhelming. I know tons of people, myself included, listening to the news in general prior to COVID and listening to it now, you can be a deer in headlights and like, I want to help. I have no idea where to start. So one thing that I heard a while ago, which you're speaking to is, yes, be informed. How much news you take in is a whole other conversation, but yes, be informed. And at the same time, a way you can be informed without being completely thrown up against the wall is to choose and say, okay, what's one thing I can do in my community I just got totally triggered by what I just heard on the news. What's one thing I can do in my community to advocate to decrease that? And you just shared so many. Yeah, go ahead.
It just reminds me, a friend recently told me she talks a lot about like having ADD as an adult, right? And finding ways to like cope and manage through that. And she was sharing with me that it can be really overwhelming to know where to start when you have so many things kind of flying around, so many like sound bites hitting you. And it's kind of like when you're watching the news, right? Like sometimes it's just like, okay, how do I like, whoa. And she was saying, and I like this, and I feel like it's a good analogy for what you're saying too, but she was saying her approach is like, just do 10 things. Just do 10 things, 10 little things. It could be, I'm going to put away my socks. I'm going to go unload the dishwasher. I'm going to take the trash out, whatever it is, 10 things. And in this way, it's like, just pick one thing out of a list of things that you need to get done, but like, just approach this and say like, all right, volunteering can be like, it doesn't have to necessarily be your full-time job. And particularly I feel parents have a lot on their plates right now, right? Like just the past 2 years, I think for any parents, whether you're working outside of the home or you're at home with your children, there are so many challenges. And so volunteering, it's like, how do you have extra time necessarily to volunteer? And so if you can find just like one way to be connected, or you can, this can be like the first step, right? Where it's like, it might not be 10 hours a week. It might be one thing you do every 6 months, but there's always something. Like there's always one way to take a step forward.
Yeah. And I also want to just highlight it is still obviously beneficial to you guys, but it's beneficial if you are strapped for time. If the feeling of volunteering makes you want to crawl under the covers and not leave until April, yes, pay it forward. Like, yes, jump online and have, if you can give $5, $10, 150, like whatever you can give is still making a difference. And then it also opens your eyes up to what they're offering, the events that are happening. And you might see something that you're like, oh my gosh, I can do that with my kids on Saturday or whatever it is.
Totally.
But if the time thing's freaking you out, all good, you know?
Exactly. There's no pressure.
There's no pressure. That's the thing. It's like, how good of a human can I be? Like, there does get to be that stress on top of everything else. And it's like, we're all good. So there's that. And I see that we're coming close to time. So I want to make sure that you highlight Women's United. I do just want to, there was one other myth or misconception that you did touch upon.
Yeah.
That I want to see if you have anything else to say, but basically that nonprofits are, I'm laughing because the previous 40 minutes, you already debunked this, but that they're ineffective and not innovative. And I'm going to have, if you have anything else to say to that, add to it. It does remind me of this idea that when people contribute their time or their money to nonprofits, there's a little bit of like a pat, like we were just of service. Okay, now let's get back to work. Let's get back to real work.
Yeah, I think that. So,
you can laugh out loud.
you know, I don't agree with that in terms of, I think that innovation is at the core of what we do. And maybe it's because we're still, when I say we run an efficient business, like we're scrappy, we hustle. And I think when you have a little bit of pressure of, you know, again, like we are stewards of investment, we have to make sure we're doing things responsibly. So we're always trying to think of ways like, how do we build things more efficiently? How do we reach more people? How do we drive greater impact? Like we do have this mentality of like, how do we do more? And I think that I know that my team really values technology and the tools that we have. And we're constantly just like, okay, what other tool can we like throw in our tool belt, right? Like there has to be examples of how this is done well. There have to be tools that make it easier. And if not, let's build it. But again, I do think you have to have a curious mindset. And that's one of the things that's really important to me that I look for, and that is definitely present within our team. But yeah, I think that's like, it's ridiculous to think that just because a business is a nonprofit, that they wouldn't be innovative or they wouldn't use technology. And hopefully day in and day out, we are an example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's one of those things too, where you've proven it from our conversation, but you said something and it totally escaped me. If it comes back to me, I'll throw it in again. When you were talking about being innovative, and being curious. And there is this idea of being able to bring that curiosity and if you are leading a nonprofit, or if you are part of a nonprofit, or you're not, and you're to get that scarcity mindset out, and just to check in, like, do I have a scarcity mindset? Do I sense that we never have enough and we're never, because then yes, you do. And then you're just feeding that more. And so where can you shift that a little bit? And, you know, reach out to Erin or any of her teammates to just gain some insight on that. But I feel like that is something that often unconsciously does come. And I want you to push back on that, but may come with that it's almost like we inherit things from our family that we don't even realize we did until we're like, wait a second, I don't believe that anymore. So just that scarcity mindset. Do you have anything?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that makes me think of is just generally, and we talk about this a lot, where, you know, there are times when I'm like, man, you know, I wish it didn't feel like we were like fighting tooth and nail for that opportunity, or I wish it didn't feel like we were the underdog. And then it's like, you know what? I think we're all at that place where we're like, no, like this is so much about how you approach something and what your mindset is. If you're telling yourself that you're the underdog, or you're telling yourself that like, you know, well, we didn't get that because we didn't deserve it. Like, of course, that's just a perpetual cycle that's going to propel itself. And so it's like back to that, like, okay, I've got to commit here. It's like, this is totally within your remit, within your team's remit, to just be like, no, like we are going to have the mentality of a winner. Like we are going to make this an opportunity that we win, and you're not going to win them all, But at least if you're approaching it that way, it's like you're trying to propel yourself forward, and you're not getting stuck in that, like, this isn't working. It's broken. We can't fix it. It's like, no, we're going to make this work. We're going to fix it. Like,
Yeah.
I really do think that there's something powerful about that mindset.
I agree. Get yourself out of the snowbank. I couldn't help it. I got to
plow through it.
Plow through it. I love how you brought it back full circle. And, I'm so excited for you to be able to celebrate your 4-year anniversary in March, and also just in time for Women's United, which sounds like such a fantastic event. If you could just share highlights from that, if you could give us peeks into any, I don't want you to have to give too much, but like any guests or anything like that.
Sure.
Any of the goodies.
Yeah. So this is an exciting year for us. I think you might have mentioned it earlier, but this is our 100th anniversary. And so we have a whole bunch of things going on this year, but one of those is Women United. We used to call it 100 Women Who Care. It's gotten bigger than that, and it's now the third time that we'll be hosting this. We weren't able to have it last year. It is on for this year, and we're really excited about it. It's Tuesday, March 1st. But really, this is all about bringing together women in our community around, putting together an event that is all centered on wellness and empowerment. So a lot of what we've been talking about today in terms of feeling empowered to, commit to a vision or to inspire people around you or to make an impact. But so anyway, the course of the event, it's a 2.5-hour event. There's great food planned. We've got some great speakers. We have someone who has been affiliated with United Way for many years as a volunteer, as a donor, and she's going to be sharing excerpts from her mother's memoir, which is entitled The Journey. And so it's a really inspiring story of a woman who just drew strength from her faith and her community and her family as she relocated as an immigrant to this area. And so we're really excited about that story. There are a number of different well-being, wellness activities that are going to happen. I don't know if you've ever done Zen Doodling. I have not done Zen Doodling, but I'm excited to understand, again, tying back to that creative drive and curiosity and channeling, all the noise and being in more of a position of mindfulness. I think that's going to be a great activity. I've never done it, so we'll see. Have you? Have you heard of this?
I haven't, but you're making me think of simians, not to give a shout out to simians, but how they have the paper over.
Yes.
I always had this idea. I'm
placemats. I love them.
You know what? If every boardroom or common area in a business just had big butcher paper with markers and during meetings, people could just doodle, you might increase your innovation. That's something to think about. But Zen Doodling, I've never done, but it makes sense. Totally.
Right? There's lots of women-owned businesses who are sponsoring the event, who are going to come, and they'll have tables, whether they have products that they're selling or that they're offering samples of. Just a really good group of strong women in this community kind of coming together. So lots of fun activities, some great speakers, good representation from the community. It's going to be fabulous. So when we started this event, it was a fundraiser for one of our early education initiatives that we run, Ready for Kindergarten, because, we were really tying together those two things, right? Where it's early childhood development and really any caregiver plays an important role in that. But specifically, we were seeing in this community, there were a lot of challenges and burdens on women to kind of carry that load. And so we were just tying those two opportunities together in terms of the Ready for Kindergarten program and then bringing women together for this wellness and empowerment kind of moment of relief.
Mm-hmm.
So check it out. I mean, I think
so
it's
fun. I'm rounding up. I already have texts out to get a table of 8. And if not, I'll be there with one, but I think we can do it. I have a few, I think between us, we could figure it out. So, cause that's an option too. So for anybody listening, and you'll see when you go to the registration page, you can buy one, or if you can rally up 7 other women or men, you know, hey, listen.
It does not have to just be for women.
100%.
Lifting up our women. Yeah.
Lifting up. And Dietra Harvey's going to be on in a couple of weeks too for Academics First to highlight that you guys are doing too. So we'll be sure to, do another plug for Women's United when she's on as well. Any last thoughts, any last misconceptions that you're thinking of that you want to debunk?
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I always love chatting with you, regardless of what it's about. But the one thing, it's funny because I think what this program does is also like in that vein of just like connecting people, opening doors, having tough conversations. It brings me back to, I mentioned briefly, but I feel like now more than ever, relationships really matter. And it's funny because like we've gotten to this point where a lot of interaction happens online. Mm-hmm. But I do try to remember that like all of that still has real world impact. And relationships, I feel like, drive so much of our business at United Way. And enable us to make connections and to make impact. But it's really easy sometimes to lose sight of that, especially, I mean, I know like, and I love that your closet and your camera have enabled like a window into these opportunities to have these conversations. But in general, like this idea of like being disconnected and like not being with people has like put a little bit of stress on that. And I feel like it is so important for our business day to day in terms of what we do, but just like personally. And I mean, also talking about well-being, I feel like those connections and those relationships matter. Mm-hmm. I don't know. So I'm grateful for this opportunity because I think even though we're behind a screen, like, again, it all goes back to like connections and relationships. So.
Absolutely. And, just to close it out here too, for any businesses or anybody who's working and wants to, I keep hearing too from clients being able to, how do we, we're working hybrid, or we have people who are working more remote now, and we want to find ways to get us safely back together. To do some sort of workplace campaign that United Way offers, you can look on their website to further explore that option of doing something as a united front, as a full organization, as a department, to have just a boosted sense of morale and engagement is beautiful. And the sponsorship's always an option too.
Yeah, I think it's all, it goes back to that like shared passion, shared desire to be part of something. Mm-hmm. We still have all that. And I do think it's been an interesting couple of years, but it is refreshing to see that people are still realizing that that's important.
Well, you guys clearly are doing something right if you're celebrating 100 years. So congratulations. Congratulations there. And when people want to learn more, Erin, where can they go to find out more about United Way?
Our website is a wealth of information, a treasure trove, really, unitedwaymv.org. There's information about events, about the partners that we work with, about the impact we're doing in the community. So check it out.
Fantastic. I know you guys are on Instagram because I follow you there. Any other socials that are heavily used, or mainly the website?
No, we're on the others, but I'd say website, Instagram.
Perfect. Okay. People will meet you there, and I will see you on March 1st, if not sooner.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Erin.